Haley.
I'm just going to angle this. Good evening, honorable members of the committee. My name is Haley McKee. I am also part of the effort working to stop solitary confinement in Rhode Island. And I just wanted to touch on something that I've heard in this committee tonight. And I wasn't planning on talking about COVID, but I heard COVID mentioned in this committee, and I just wanted to point out that it wasn't just correctional officers' lives who were lost. And as a matter of fact, I had heard, I believe it was the director who had said, we did our best to try to keep them away from the inmates. And we're not inmates. We're people who are formerly incarcerated or people who are incarcerated. It's person-centered language. We're not stock as we're listed on DOC website. We're not, we're not inmates. We're people. And it was, sad for me to hear that the effort was to keep the staff away from the inmates or people who were incarcerated when, in fact, the people who were incarcerated who passed were sentenced in the men's maximum medium facilities, and there was nobody in and out of those buildings. So unless you were at men's intake or women, there was no coming or going. There was only one way for that virus to enter those buildings. And that's not with assigning blame. I also want to mention that we as a community banded together, comprised mostly of formerly incarcerated people, and advocated a little bit radically, but we got the job done to make sure that not only the people who were incarcerated, but also the correctional officers were prioritized on that vaccination schedule, and that they got first dibs because we realized that they met the requirements for it. So when that virus was ripping through men's max in particular without walls, in just bars, and these people were defenseless, and that would be staff and people who are incarcerated. I just want to draw attention to the fact that the other people's deaths weren't mentioned in this committee hearing tonight, and I just find something really unsettling about that. And it was formerly incarcerated people who offered the solutions to get people access to that vaccination shortly thereafter. Unfortunately, it was just a little bit too late for some folks. So just going to touch really quickly on my experience. So I am formerly incarcerated. I was released a few years ago. I did a pretty lengthy stint in the women's facility. And Rep Diaz, I heard you had questions about what that looks like. I'm in this building all the time, and I'm always happy to answer them. I don't see what worked for me, and granted, I'm just one person, but I don't see what worked for me not behind the walls, but what led where I didn't recidivate, where I was able to maintain recovery and, rack up some college degrees, find meaningful work, build a healthy network, reestablish a relationship with my family. I think that the moment that turned things around for me when I was incarcerated was when I met a woman named Michelle Harder. She was a peer at the time who was coming into the prison and working from Anchor Recovery Community Center. And I got to talking to this woman about a year after I became incarcerated. And it was a turning point for me where it just kind of opened my eyes. And I saw a woman who had shared similar life experiences as I did. And I realized that that's what I wanted to do when I got home. And it wasn't anything, and whatever they're depicting is a picture of what things look like behind the walls. There's one college class in the women's facility a year that comes around for 25 people. That's false, right? The programming, the things that the Department of Correction is prioritizing in the budget that they feel like we need it couldn't be further from the truth. So anyhow, back to Michelle Harder. I knew when I was released from prison, I could go to Anchor Recovery as a landing space. When I was there, people said you should go to school for psychology. I ended up going to school for psychology. I met my recovery network. I work in recovery. Nowadays, I work in research, studying opioids and overdose before I head over here for the afternoons and work on policy reform. So, it's just concerning to me when I hear things about how prison wages are acceptable, that $1 to $3 a day, you have to pay for your own soap, which the market on commissary in the prisons behind the walls, your own sanitary supplies for women, right? Ritz crackers are probably about $4 a box. So, prison industries, when I was at Rhode Island College before I graduated, I was stunned to see the truck pull up with people in prison clothes. And I didn't know at the time what that was, but I sensed something was up because in women's facility, don't leave the building. I would hate to see that the state is making a profit off of, I'm not going to say what it is, but $1 to $3 a day, that's not something that should be allowed. And granted, I don't blame these men for getting out of their cells during the day. And one more point, and I think that you've heard kind of a theme here. I got thrown into solitary confinement for my drug detox. So I was there a few years ago when they didn't have access to medically assisted recovery medications such as Suboxone, methadone, or naltrexone. So their answer to it, like many things that happen behind those walls, is let's put this person in solitary confinement. For not very good reasons oftentimes. Somebody gets upset because they ran out of their favorite cereal in the chow line, because we're animals, we eat chow, right? And it's an important topic. So if they're looking, if you're talking about, and it's embarrassing to read in the paper that 10 of your 30 highest paid employees in the state are working in corrections, and that was 29 or 39 of them actually made over $100,000 in overtime alone in one given year. And we're proposing a solution to close down a high facility center that they're looking at expanding. It costs $200,000 per year per person who's incarcerated in those torturous conditions. So we have answers. Other states are figuring it out. They're shutting down these facilities. They're capping the amount of time. And meanwhile, my friends are serving months, if not years, in these horrendous conditions. That it should not be acceptable in our society. So, I'm going to echo what Nick and Joe and Brandon have spoken about, that this issue of confinement, and it is solitary confinement. So if they deny that, they call it administrative disciplinary confinement. It's all the same. It's people in a box by themselves for outrageously long periods of time, where they do end up, things happen in those spaces. So any extra consideration you can give to that issue in particular would be most welcome and greatly appreciated. And I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Haley. And again, thank you for all of you folks who, coming out, testifying, and sharing your personal stories.